is just in a very short term. Systematic study of making inquiry into what you see that requires to be studied. Systematic inquiry. And in this case, we are looking at social issues where you have probably seen an event or a phenomenon or a social issue, a social problem, and you want to find out why that issue is on. You're expected to carry out a research, a study, a scientific one in that matter. You don't, as a human being, you are free to have an assumption. You are free to have an assumption, which might be correct or wrong. If you now want to be very sure of your assumption, you carry out a study, you carry out a scientific study of making inquiry into that which you have identified as a problem to see whether your assumptions are correct or not. And that you will not do haphazardly. You have to go systematically. And that is why it's called systematic inquiry. There you first identify a problem. A problem must be identified before you go on with it. Or you must have identified an issue. Most times, our mind goes to something negative, a problem in the negative aspect. You can see, let's use a family that is in good relationship, everything seems to be very okay. And you probably will want to find out why that unity in that family, so that you can get the reason for that unity and then pass it on to the families that are having issues. That's why we normally say best practice. Go to a society where things are done orderly, things are done well. You want to find out why they are doing well, so that you can copy their style and replicate. But also find a situation where there is a problem, negative, something, a problem, and then you want to carry out a study, an inquiry, to know why that is existing. Take in case of a drug addict, why is this child, or why are the youth into this drug addict? Definitely, there are reasons. And you as a human being, you're likely going to do what? Have an assumption. And your assumption could just be, oh, maybe the friends is making, the friends, the boys, the youth are making, what is making them to go into drug. That may not be all. Could be other factors, could be other variables, other elements that would have pushed this youth into taking drugs. So that is just in a nutshell when we talk about research. And then this research has methods. As I earlier said, you don't do it haphazardly. You don't just come up and say, I want to carry out a study, and you just go ahead to do it the way you like. No. I've been proving way of carrying out research so that you can arrive at a meaningful conclusion. There are methods, and that is why we have what we call advanced research methods. So now, in the context of social work, we now call it advanced social work research methods. So social work research is an essential aspect of our social work profession. And why is it an essential aspect of our profession? It is essential, it is important because it gives us the opportunity to provide an empirical foundation for effective practice. Providing the empirical foundation for effective practice. Empirical in the sense that when you carry out this research, you will have findings, we have results. And it's from the result we will now come up with programs. We'll come up with policies that will help us to carry out our work as social workers. So provides the empirical foundation. We use the word foundation because it's the foundation, the beginning of it. If you now discover that the youths are into drug as a result of this, it enables you to come up with answer to the problem. Because there is no research work that does not have recommendation. Recommendation will be made on random. Oh, we recommend that these youth should have training to know the effects of this drug they are taking. That when they are aware, when they have the knowledge of the side effect of drugs, there is that likeliness that they will not continue. And can also make a recommendation in the aspect of counseling. So they need to be counseled to know what they are supposed to know as regards to drug taking. So if research is not carried out in that line, you will not have recommendation. You will not find an answer. I mean, you have a finding, a result based, we always make our recommendations based on our findings. So it provides the empirical foundation for effective practice. And you know our practice. We counsel, we draw programs, we make referrals, we inform policy making and all that. So as a profession that addresses complex social issues, is a profession that handles complex social issues. Social issues such as poverty, we know that is a social issue. Housing is a social issue. Lack of access to healthcare is a social issue. Lack of access to education is a social issue. Child welfare is a social issue. Violence is a social issue. Substance abuse is also an issue we address as social workers. Mental health is also a social issue. What of the area of social justice? In a society where you have injustice, it becomes a problem that we have to look into to see how we can restore social justice. So social work relies on research. We rely on research to inform our interventions. We rely on it because it will also help us to evaluate our programs. You can institute a program and you carry out a study to find out if that program is actually working out well or not. You don't just assume and say, oh, if we do this, this will happen. Fine, you have done it. You evaluate to see whether that program is actually working or not. So social work relies heavily on research. to inform our intervention, to help us plan out what we will do, to help us evaluate programs, either the programs we instituted or programs that an organization instituted or program that is being instituted by government. And it also helps us to improve service delivery. So if we should define social work research, I'll put it that it is a systematic, scientific inquiry aimed at developing knowledge about social issues. Developing knowledge about social issues, evaluating social work interventions, and improving policies and practices that affect individuals, affect families, as well as communities. So, what do we do there? We apply quantitative and qualitative research method to investigate these social problems and then have an informed, evidence-based practice. And when I mean evidence-based practice, is the integration, evidence-based practice is the integration of the best available research evidence with clinical expertise and client preferences to improve outcomes. So in application, social workers will always use findings from our research work to determine the most effective interventions for diverse populations. For instance, studies on cognitive behavioral therapy for trauma survivors, guide social workers in the area of mental health intervention. So several scholars have defined social work research in various ways. For example, we have Newman, who stated that social work research is a process of rigorous inquiry. He sees it as a process of rigorous inquiry to understand social problems. Rigorous inquiry to understand social problems, evaluate our interventions, and then contribute to the field of knowledge. Searswell also sees it as a structured process of data collection, data analysis, and finally, the interpretation of this data that have been collected in order to help us inform policies and social work interventions. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. No, it's like you lost me, Abby.
Yes, ma'am. At a point.
Okay. Okay. So in this case now, what are the key features? What are the key characteristics of social work research? When we say social work research, the key characteristics of it. One, the major one is problem-oriented. What do I mean by that? Is where our social work research will focus on addressing real world social problems affecting vulnerable population. So one of the features of social work research is problem-oriented. That is focusing on addressing real world, that is real life situation when it comes to social problems that affect the group that we are out for, the group that we lend our voices to. Who are the group or who are the people? Which population is that? We look at them as vulnerable population. So the second key feature of it is that social work research try as much as possible to integrate knowledge from psychology, public health, knowledge from sociology, knowledge from economics, and even knowledge from law. So we don't just stand alone. We encourage ourselves to have what we call interdisciplinary collaboration. We collaborate with people from the discipline of sociology, psychology. Hello, I hope you're hearing me. Are you hearing me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Psychology, sociology, public health, economics, political science, law, and all that. And so that is one of our major features. We don't stand alone. The third one is this. We aim at practical applications rather than abstract theories, because we handle human beings. We always ensure that our aim will be to practically apply what the research has found out, and based on the findings, recommendations are made, and then you see us applying those recommendations in the area of coming up with interventions or developing programs and all whatnot. So one of the key features is in the area of the aim at practical application rather than abstract theories. Then another very serious one, because we deal with human beings. We do not play with ethical considerations. Our research must, as a question of must adhere to ethical guidelines to ensure the dignity, the confidentiality, and the well-being of our participants. Most times, our participants in our research work are the vulnerable groups and probably other persons. So we don't play with ethical guidelines, ensuring the dignity of our participants, the confidentiality of the information they have given to us, and in general, their well-being, ensuring that our research work, our study will not cause harm to our participants. And then we use diverse methodologies. We are not stuck to one particular method. We use diverse methodologies. We use qualitative method. We use quantitative method. We combine the two in some cases, which we call the mixed method, just to analyze our social phenomena. So now we go to the scope. The scope. Our scope is broad. Our scope is broad. Social work encompasses a wide range of domains within the fields of social work practice, within the field of policy making, and even theory development. So social work research is applied in the following key areas. We have key areas we apply social work research. One is research in social work practice. Research in social work practice. That this research in social work practice improves practice. And how does it improve practice? It improves practice by offering evidence-based methods for intervention and assessment. Casework research is one of the practical areas that involves the study of individual and family interventions, just to develop the most effective practices in counseling and therapy. We also have the group work research. We have group work research, which necessitates the assessment of the efficacy of community intervention or support groups, and also group therapy. We also have community work research, all under the research in social work practice. We have the community work research, in which we try to, in this case, we try to evaluate the impact of community-based programs on social development. When we talk about community work research, we try to evaluate the impact of community-based programs on social development. And I could say that finally there is this field of social work also in healthcare. In healthcare, we'll talk about social work in healthcare research. It involves, an analysis of the responsibilities of social workers in palliative care. That is where you see us. practicing very well. Our responsibilities there is in the area of palliative care. Mental health institutions, we work there, even in hospitals too. So social work, we also have social work in schools. These are practical areas. Practical areas. We have social work in schools. We have social work in industrial settings. These are our practice areas and other settings too. Then we have, hello, I hope you are with me.
Yes, we are.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So this I've tried to mention, when we talk about research in social work practice, I've mentioned these areas. Our practice areas. We carry out research, studies, evaluate what we are doing in our community, evaluate what we are doing in schools, evaluate what we are doing in the healthcare, what we are doing with individuals, what we are doing with families, and what we can offer them. That is what we mean research in social work practice. Then we now have research in social policy and administration. And when we talk about social work policy and administration, it's entirely policy formation. This entails policy formulation. Policy formulation. So social research informs policymakers. The findings we get, based on findings, we make recommendations that will inform policymakers by providing empirical evidence on social problems. So when we carry out research, if you are saying, oh, this is what we have found out, that there is no policy in the area of child welfare as it has to do with hawking. This is what we have discovered. And we are recommending this, that. Who are we recommending to? We are recommending to policymakers. So social workers inform policymakers. How do we inform them? By showing them evidence, empirical evidence on that particular social problem we have discovered, and then make our possible recommendations that will inform solution. So it also covers program evaluation. And so this aspect of research, we try to evaluate the effectiveness of social service programs. So we carry out research just to evaluate the effectiveness of social service programs. Effectiveness could be effectiveness in the area of accountability, will be in the area of efficiency. This program that government has put up, how effective is this program? Is it really working? Take, for instance, the one that were instituted, school feeding, children in school. And you know that one of our vulnerable population, you have the children. And then the government coming up with school feeding. We can go in there to carry out, a research, a study to evaluate the effectiveness of that program in the area of its efficiency and also in the area of accountability. So whatever we find out, we'll make recommendation and we'll let the government know this is what we have found out about the school feeding. We carried out a research, a study, and this is what we discovered. And based on what we found out, we have made these recommendations. It will not only be negative findings, could also be a positive findings where if what you find out is good, What do you do? What will be your recommendation? Your recommendation will be encouragement. So when we talk about findings, don't always look at it from the negative aspect. Your findings can be something good, and then you make a recommendation in the area of encouragement. The system should be encouraged to continue with what they are doing. And instead of going down, should also make sure they improve on it, because it is a program that is beneficial. So this research in social policy and administration too also focus on welfare and social security studies, and examine the impact of government welfare programs, which I've just mentioned one: school feeding, free medical, and you know them, so many of them. Then we have research on social problems. Social work research also goes further to investigate pressing social issues. Pressing social issues. Can somebody just mention one pressing social issues that we are battling with? Pressing social issues. One, just mention one.
Insecurity.
Insecurity, correct. Poverty is there. Am I
Unemployment.
correct? Unemployment is there. Substance abuse is there. Substance abuse and addiction. So we'll carry out research on social issues. And so I mentioned some of them. Some key areas: you have poverty, you have economic inequality. When you talk of economic inequality, and now we'll be studying the impact of economic disparity on the different social groups. We have substance abuse and addiction. And if you're looking at substance abuse and addiction, what do you do there? What you do is to examine intervention strategies. Intervention strategies for individuals and families that are affected by addiction. We have the mental health research. What do we do in mental health research? We investigate the effectiveness of mental health interventions and access to care. Access to care. We have communities, we have hospitals, we have health centers. The question there is, do our communities have access to this health care? You find out that child welfare and protection. What do you do? What research do we carry out inside as it's a social problem? Child welfare and protection is a social problem. So the research we carry out there will be to assess foster care, child welfare and protection, by assessing foster care, assessing adoption policies. What are the adoption policies? And then also child abuse prevention programs. So we carry out research on such social problem. And of course, we cannot, yes, we cannot forget the almighty social issue we know about. Nobody mentioned it. Domestic violence is a social issue. So we do carry out research on that. Domestic violence and gender-based violence. So what research we do, what do we look for there? When we talk about domestic violence, what are we looking for? We will be researching, our research will be on its prevalence. Its prevalence. We'll be researching the causes, researching on the interventions for abuse survivors. That is what we do there. Majorly, when you talk about domestic violence, you now ask yourself, it's a social problem. First, it's identified as a social problem that requires research, that requires to be studied. And what do you study there? Number one thing will be researching the prevalence. Researching the prevalence. Checking for the causes of it. And then when you've looked for the prevalence, the causes, do you leave it like that? No. The interventions. How do we help these abuse survivors? So social problems are many. Nobody has mentioned crime and juvenile delinquency. Juvenile crime, juvenile delinquency. Crime and juvenile delinquency is also an area of concern to us as social workers. And what do we do there? We try to analyze social factors that influence or that are influencing criminal behavior. That's what we do there. By analyzing social factors influencing what? Criminal behavior. And not just finding out that one, not just analyzing, but go further to also look at rehabilitation programs to help the situation. Another area of our social work research is on social justice and human rights. Social justice and what? Human rights. Can you see that our scope is broad?
Massive, yes.
Yes. So because you might be just wondering, oh, which area will I now research on? I'm mentioning all that to you right now. Social justice and human rights. And when we talk about social justice and human rights, it's also an aspect of, social work research that covers, gender, social inequality. And when you talk about gender and social inequality, because that is where you see social injustice, what do you do there? What are we looking for there? We try to examine gender disparities. Gender disparities in employment, gender disparities in education, and even gender disparity in healthcare. And then human trafficking and migration is also an aspect of social justice and human rights, human trafficking and migration. And what do we look for there? We try to investigate the impacts of forced migration. The impact of forced migration. People that flood have carried their place. People that have been displaced from their place, where they live. They will be forced to migrate from there to another place. So we call that one forced migration. So migration, by investigating the impact of forced migration and policies for protecting these vulnerable groups. So we research, we study to find out, are there policies instituted by the government to protect these vulnerable groups? And if there are policies, are they implemented? Are they enforced? How effective are they? And all that. So when you're thinking of social justice and human rights, do not forget the gender, where you have social inequalities in the area of gender disparities in the employment, Education. For education, I think for Nigeria now, at least that has come down. It's not as high as before. If you go to schools now and check the enrollment figure, you discover that more female are now in school, especially in the south and in the southeast or the southwest. You have more female in school. So at least that area, the disparity is not much. But then we'll still have disparity in healthcare. We still have disparity in employment in some areas. Then social justice in the area of disability and social inclusion. What do we do there? Disability, that is physically challenged people. They are vulnerable groups that we care for. They are vulnerable groups that we care for. So what do we research there? We research on policies and interventions that promote the rights of persons with what? Disabilities. That is what we do. Disability and social inclusion by researching policies, studying policies and interventions that promote the rights of persons with disabilities. And then finally, which normally we always bring it last, is research in organizational industrial social work. Because our work, social work goes to the extent of looking at what happens in organizations. There, the scope is primarily interested in employee well-being and work stress. And what do we do there? We try to study the occupational stress in that organization, the burnout, the mental health interventions in the workplace. Still in this organizational research, you look at diversity and inclusion in organizations by investigating how social workers contribute to equitable workplace policies. I hope you've heard of this acronym CSR, Corporate Social Responsibility, by assessing the impact of corporate social initiatives on communities. So social workers will do all that. Go to a community where they have industries. Social workers' responsibility there, your interest will be to assess the impact of corporate social initiatives that are going on in that community. Is the community benefiting from these industries that are in their community? Are they helping the community by providing some basic necessities of life to make the life of the community better, community members better? Are they employing them? Or when they want to employ them, they employ completely outsiders? In what way? In what ways are the communities benefiting? And so we call that corporate social responsibility. So our interest there is to assess the impact of the corporate social initiatives on this community. So we have a lot. And so that is about the scope. Any questions so far? Any question?
So broad.
No, ma.
No, are you sure?
Yes, ma, for now.
Let's be
Okay.
flowing with it.
I didn't get it. What did you say?
Flowing along, ma.
Okay, that's fine. So before I go further, uh, to talk about the methods, I want to ask if you've heard of the word called variables. Research variables.
I heard, but I can't.
So
I've
what
heard.
is it? What do you mean by research variables?
Where we have so many, how do I explain myself? We have where we have more than one, how do I put it? More than one variables to work with.
So what is a variable? What is a variable?
That's the one I can't break now.
It's just one person that is talking. I want to hear
I
another
think
person.
the elements, the key elements of what we are looking at.
Okay. So a variable is any characteristics. A variable is any characteristics, any element, or any attribute, or any condition, or factor. You've heard me? You are hearing me?
Yes, ma'am.
It could be an attribute, it could be an element, it could be a condition or a factor that can be measured, and varies across individuals. It varies across individuals, it varies across groups or situations in a research study. So variables are the foundations for research because they define the relationship between different elements under investigation. So there is need to understand research variables. It's essential for conducting systematic scientific, inquiries, especially in our field, social work. So for instance, imagine a study on the effect of social work interventions on the mental health of single mothers. Imagine a study on the effect of social work interventions on the mental health of single mothers. And then, can we hear of one intervention, effect of social work intervention on the mental health of single mothers? I'm asking, what can you do for a single mother as a social worker, as one of your interventions on the mental health of a single mother or single mothers?
Support, financial support, counseling.
Mm-hmm. Counseling is you talk financial, so you have plenty money like that. Our
But
number
at
one
least
thing there is
most
counseling.
counseling. Yes.
Counseling. Mm-hmm.
Counseling.
Counseling. So counseling now is a variable. Which is social work intervention. Social work intervention is a variable. Then mental health. What do you think mental health can cause? It can
Mental
cause
health
depression,
issue,
correct?
depression.
Depression.
Yes,
Depression.
depression,
Depression.
anxiety, mm, suicidal
And so,
thoughts.
okay, so that depression is a variable. So you bring the two together. Most times our studies must have independent and dependent what variable. The other one depending on the other variable. And then we have the intervening variables. But what we are talking about now is variable generally. And I say it could be a form of condition, can be a factor, can be an attribute, can be an element that you can measure. So I now give this example. I say a study on the effect of social work interventions, which we have mentioned counseling as one of our interventions, carrying it out on the mental health of single mothers. And of course, single mothers, if you don't take time, they go into different levels of depression. So, which means that mental health of single mothers, which is in the area of probably, let's pick the depression level, is dependent on the social work intervention, which we have picked counseling as one of them. And one of us say financial support, because our interventions can be more than one. So we're taking counseling and financial support. So the depression level of a single mother is dependent on what? On the effect of our social work intervention. So our social work intervention stands as an independent variable. Why is an independent is a condition, is a factor, and it can be measured. So I now say, does counseling reduce depression? I'm asking you.
Of course,
Yes.
yes.
Okay. So in that case now we have two main variables. Our independent variable now is counseling, which is an intervention. You agree with me?
Yes.
Okay. And then the dependent variable, which is depression level. So when we say an element is a variable or a condition is a variable or a factor is a variable in our research, in our research, that variable must have features. So one is that the variables must be measurable. The variables must be what? Measurable.
Measurable.
Yes. Variables must have clear, quantifiable, or categorical attributes that can be recorded, and analyzed. That can be recorded and what? Analyzed. And then they must have variability. They must have variability. That is, if a characteristic does not change, it cannot be considered a variable. If it cannot change, cannot be considered a variable. Variability is something that should be able to change. And then they can be manipulated. A variable can be manipulated. Just as I mentioned, a single mothers, the single mothers, they're the element now. And you manipulate them by canceling them. Single mothers that are into depression, you cancel them. Introduction of counseling or introduction of financial support is a manipulation on them. That is, you have introduced something to cause a change. Are you with me?
Yes.
I'm trying to explain the characteristics of a research variable. And I say that if a characteristic does not change, it cannot be considered as what? A variable.
Oh.
And it's something that can be manipulated or observed. Variables are observable. Take, for instance, you said that somebody is anxious. I hope you know that being anxious, anxiety is an abstract word. How do we measure it? When I have mentioned that a variable must be measurable. You must bring it to the point where it can be measured. You must bring that abstract word called anxiety to a level where it can be measured. And then in that case, it means you will look out for indicators, things to show that this person is actually anxious. So the indicators are what we now measure to probably know the level of anxiety in that person. One could be fast pulse, the pulse could be reading fast. It could be gazing. You are observing the person gazing. The person is looking and looking disturbed. You are watching. There are signs to show that somebody is anxious. Those are the indicators you are looking at for to measure them. And that is why I said that research variable must be measurable. If it's not measurable, you cannot record anything because variables must be recorded and analyzed in your research work. So if you're writing a project, if you're doing a study and you cannot measure, you cannot really say, this is how I measure, these are the indicators I use to measure this. That means you just on your own confabulated one story based on your assumption and you come up with results. They can be categorical or they can be continuous. Variables can be grouped. What I mean is that you can group variables. You can group them into categories or measure them along a numerical scale. I hope you know that we used to group age. When it comes to age, from so age to so, you group them. So variables can be categorized, can categorize them male, female, age between so and so, and all that. So we have the independent variable, also known as the predictor or the explanatory variable. Independent variable is the variable that you, the social worker, manipulates or you categorize it to observe its effect on another variable. You do it to observe its effect on another variable. For instance, let's take an example of studying the impact of counseling. We want to study the impact of counseling on reducing depression level among domestic violence survivors. An example is examining how, another example is examining how employment and training programs influence job acquisition rate among unemployed youth. Then when it comes to dependent variable now, we see it as the outcome variable. Dependent variables, we refer to them also as outcome variable. Dependent variable is also called an outcome variable. Is the effect or the response that is measured in the study. You measure outcome. So it depends on the independent variable. An example is, you can take the example of, again, mental health status. You can take mental health status of elderly individuals or elderly people receiving social support. Receiving social support. What is the outcome of it? We measure it. The outcome is called the dependent variable. We have the control variable. Control variable. A variable that is held constant to prevent it from influencing the dependent variable is called the controlled variable. A variable that is held constant to prevent it from influencing the dependent variable. And so you ensure that only the independent variable that will affect the dependent variable. I give an example of a study on the effect of therapy on anxiety level. On effect of therapy on anxiety level, age, gender, and also previous medical history may be controlled to ensure they do not confound the results. Then we have the confounding variable. Confounding variable. That is a factor that influences both the independent and the dependent variable. That factor that influences both the dependent and independent variable, potentially distorting the true relationship between them. Because if a variable should be influencing both the independent and the dependent variable, it will definitely distort the true relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. Like a study on the effect of unemployment on youth crime. A confounding variable there could be, family background, as it may independently influence both employment, both employment status and criminal behavior. So I just brought in these variables because we'll be mentioning variables. So when we say dependent and independent variable, we know what we're talking about. So we'll come back to our research methodologies in social work. As I earlier mentioned, I said that social work research will always employ various methodologies. We are not just using one particular method. We employ various methodologies depending on the nature of the study we are carrying out, the nature of it, the objectives of the study. So two major methodologies I will mention. One is quantitative research method, and then another one is qualitative. And when we say When we say quantitative research methods, it means using numerical data to measure and analyze social phenomena. That is to say, using numbers. When I say numerical data, referring to using numbers to look at social trend, to look at social issues, and at the same time measure it. Remember, I said that variables must be what? Measurable. So this is situation where you assign numbers to these variables to enable you measure them. So it uses quantitative research method, uses numbers to look and measure social events, social phenomena, or social phenomena, activities, trends, social trends, and all that. Example, we have we've heard of surveys now, statistical analysis. When you hear of statistical analysis, it's analyzing numbers that you've assigned to these variables you use to collect data. And then, it's where you say, let's say, assessing the effectiveness of drug rehabilitation program using statistical comparison. If you are using statistical comparison, if you want to do a statistical comparison on, assessing the effectiveness of drug rehabilitation, the method of research you will use there will be quantitative because you're doing comparison, quantitative. And so the survey you do there is to gather data. You now gather data from a large population. Now we have the secondary data, secondary data analysis. So this uses existing data sets from organizations and government agencies. That is to say, you're using, collection of information that already exists from organizations and government agencies. That is when you say it's secondary data analysis. Collection of information that already exists, already in existence. What is already in existence is referred to as secondary. The one that is not in existence, which you now want to go to the field and collect, we'll call that primary data analysis. You've gone to the field, you collected. The information was not there before. You have gone to collect the information. You have gone to collect the data. We call that primary data. But the one that is already existing there in the data sets, either from government or from organization, we call that secondary data. So when you want to analyze them, you assign numbers to them. Now we call it a use of numerical data to measure and analyze them social issues. They are researching. That is why I started by saying that the methodology you will use depend on the nature of your study and its objective. Then we have the qualitative research method. The qualitative now explores human experiences, perceptions, behaviors, in depth. When you want to have an in-depth study, in-depth knowledge of a situation, you now want to carry out a qualitative method, research method. where you will now explore the human experience in that area you want to get an in-depth knowledge about. So in application, it's understanding the lived experiences. Like if you want to know, find out the experiences the people that are refugees have. You can't just go and do quantitative study there. You will carry out qualitative, because this time around, you want to have an in-depth knowledge of it, of their lived experience. So you go straight to them and interview them. Interview them one-on-one, or you interview them as a group where they will open up and tell you their experiences. They will open up, and what you do there is recording, of course, with their permission to record what they are telling you. Then after which you arrange them in thematic areas and analyze. So an in-depth discussion with individuals to understand their experiences. If you want to, that is what qualitative research method will give you. Focus group, I mentioned that earlier. It entails, having group discussions with participants to explore their social issues. Then if you carry out that study up to the community level, we call that ethnography. Here we are looking at, that requires observing communities. You're observing communities to gain a deeper understanding of their social behavior. So if you prepare questionnaire and go to those communities and serve them, they will not even know what to feel. But when you engage them in a qualitative method of research, that is by having them in groups to have group discussion with them and be with them, observe what they are doing. Ethnography, observing, requires you observing the communities. You just go to that community and then you observe what they are doing. You will have a deeper understanding of their social behavior. But if you apply the quantitative method of research, you will not get all that. Because that quantitative, you just prepare questionnaire, you go there and you serve them. They may not even understand you will not even know what to ask them. But if you want to have a deeper understanding of their social behavior, how they live their life, what they do, what they are made up of, what they have as their strengths and their weaknesses, you have to apply that aspect called ethnography, where it requires you observing that community to gain a deeper understanding of their social behavior. So that is about the qualitative. Summarily, qualitative avails you to interview. When you carry out interview, when you carry out focus group discussion, when you carry out ethnography, where you observe communities, go live with them, watch them what they are doing, and keep record of all that in understanding their social behavior. That method of research is what we refer to as qualitative research method. Then the third one is where you are free to use both method. You can decide to combine both quantitative and qualitative approach. You are free to combine both quantitative and qualitative approaches to provide comprehensive insight into the social work issue you are studying. You are free to do that. For example, understanding the lived experiences of refugees in a social service program. You can use both quantitative and qualitative approaches so that you can have, a comprehensive insight into that issue. Then we have the action research. Action research. This action research focuses on solving social problems through participatory approach. Through participatory what? Approach. Focusing on solving social problems through participatory approach. An example is a community-led research on domestic violence intervention strategies. When you do carry out that approach or that method, you call it action research. In that case, you're focusing on solving. Mind that word. You're focusing on solving the social, that is, you're focusing on solving that domestic violence issue through what? Participatory, approach. So I now say that despite the significance of all this, we'll still have several challenges that hinder the effective use of our, effective use of research in social work. Because now you'll be thinking, is it as easy as the lecturer is saying it? It's not that easy. It's not easy. We have several challenges that used to hinder us from having an effective use of our research, carrying out effective research. And one major one is limited research awareness. Many of us lack training in reading and applying research findings. Many practitioners, that is, many social work practitioners, will lack training. Lack training in the reading and applying the research findings. That is one of our challenges. One of our challenges. Time constraint. Time constraint. Time constraint is one major one because we are often overwhelmed with heavy caseload, leaving little time for research. I mean, where you're working as a social worker, you have problem with time. You have problem with time. So when we have problem with time, just in my own case now, I teach, I'm a lecturer, I need to write papers, I need to function in the committees that I belong, I need to do this, need to do that. See, now you suffer from time constraint. If you're in the practice area, the cases are so much on you. When by the time you are trying to finish this case, another case is coming and all that. For those of us that work in child welfare units, it's like every day they are bringing cases of child welfare, issues of child welfare and all that. They are so overwhelmed with these heavy caseloads, leaving, little time for research. So it's a challenge that we have. Then in this our Nigeria, we cannot run away from funding constraints. Funding, that is a resource limitation. We have funding constraints. It has limited our research opportunities, especially in the non-profit organization. We hardly get funds. In the West, in the developed countries, they value research so much that their government will always bring out money to fund research. Even the non-profit organizations that exist, they bring out money to fund research. But here, our case is completely different. So we have that problem as a big, very big challenge. Then we have the issue with change, resistant to change. We social workers, we may hesitate to adopt new research-based intervention due to familiarities with our traditional methods. I don't think that would be the same in your own. Knowing now that we have knowing the importance of research, because research helps us to have an evidence-based practice. So the present day social workers should not be resistant to change. Please don't be resistant to change. Embrace change, because over time we've observed that the practitioners may hesitate to adopt the new research-based interventions due to our familiarities with our traditional methods of doing things. Now we say change to this. This is what the research has brought out. This is the finding and this is the recommendation. You say, no, that's not how we used to do it. So it's a challenge. Then the final one is ethical and cultural barriers. Our research must navigate these ethical concerns, privacy issues, and cultural sensitivities. There are cases that it's difficult for you to pry into people's privacy, and some will not actually tell you everything. So there is privacy issues, which is always a problem. What about cultural sensitivity? Go to the north, you can't access their females anyhow. There's always that cultural barrier which you must obey. So that ethical and cultural barriers is always a problem for us in carrying out research. But whatever be the case, we'll always try to navigate through and see that we'll come up with good research work. Any questions so far? Any question? Any question? Any question? Are we not together again? Hello?
Hello, mommy, we are together, ma. For me, I will have
Olanireti.
to. Yes, ma. I will have to sit
Olanireti.
down. Yes,
We are
mommy.
together, ma.
We are
No,
together.
no.
Okay.
For me, aside for me, we have to sit down and listen again, and so that I will grab everything.
Okay.
Thank you, ma. Yes, ma.
All right. So, any questions so far?
No questions so far. Us is
All right. But you
what's it
understood.
called now?
You understood
Yes,
our
yes, ma.
challenge. Our challenges in challenges of integrating social work into integrating our research into our social work practice.
Yes, ma.
We have issue of time.
Embracing
We have
change.
issue of
Time.
funding. We have issue of
Then cultural constraint.
yes, cultural barriers. We
Then,
have issue of
privacy
resistance to
issues.
change.
Mm.
We have issue of resistance to change. You all,
Then
you all,
limited research.
you all, yes, you all young social workers. So you will not be like the social workers of old. You should embrace or adopt new research-based interventions. Don't say you will not change because you are already familiar with a particular traditional method. Okay.
Yes, ma.
So we stop so far. Let's stop now so that when we meet again, we'll look at research designs. We'll look at research designs where we have experimental and non-experimental research design. Experimental and non-experimental, quasi-experimental designs. That is what to handle the next class.
Ma.
Okay. Yes.
Please, ma.
Yes.
This variable, you really dealt with it, you explained, but I really have not really gotten it. I know you mentioned the future. We can manipulate it, can change it, it should be observable, all those things. But the real variable is I don't really get it. I don't know if you can help me.
The river, see, I said, imagine, let's take a study now. Effect of social work intervention. Effect of social work intervention. If you want to carry out this study now, effect of social work intervention on mental health of single mothers.
Yes, ma'am.
You want to check the effect of social work intervention. What are social work interventions? You mentioned financial support, isn't it?
Yes,
And then me, I mentioned counseling, is it not?
Yes.
Financial support, counseling, they are variables.
Yes, ma'am.
They are factors.
They are the factors.
Yes.
They are the elements.
They are the elements.
It's the same thing.
Then I say,
factor.
on the mental health of single mothers. And we mentioned that one of the mental health of the single mothers is level of depression, is it not?
Yes.
Yes.
So mental health of single mothers is another variable. And I mentioned to and I said that listen, and I said that a variable must be measurable. Did I say so?
Yes, you said.
Yes.
Social work intervention is an abstract word now. How do you measure social work intervention? Social work intervention is counseling, financial support, what again? Name them. When it comes to mental health of single mothers. Mental health of single mothers is an abstract word, mental health. Oh, mental health of single. How will you know that a woman is having mental health problem? How will you know? The only way you will know is to have an indicator to show that the person is having mental health. And one of it is what? Depression, anxiety and all that. And that is a variable.
Okay.
So depression level is a variable when it comes to mental health.
Okay.
Anxiety is a variable when it comes to mental health. And I said that one of the characteristics is that it must be measurable. Social work intervention or social work interventions is just there. And somebody asks you, and you say you want to measure the effect of social work intervention on mental health. And somebody will ask you, how did you measure it? Which effect are you looking at? Which social work intervention are you looking at? You have to say the social work intervention that you melted or you carried out on these single mothers. So those are social work interventions. They are what? They are the factors, they are the elements that you now measure. So social work intervention is a variable. Mental health of single mother, variable. And one is depending on the other. So, mental health of single mothers in the area of depression level is depending on the what social work intervention in the area of counseling, in the area of funding, I'll be giving money, whichever way you want to do it, or even in the area of referral.
Okay.
Do you know that one of our intervention is referring these our single mothers when you have seen the level of their depression, that is not the one only counseling will work, maybe to also require medical attention. When you refer to the medical people, you have done something. It's an intervention. Referral is an intervention. And so that's your counseling, that's your financial support, that's your referral. They are the independent variables. Is it making sense now?
Mom is Clara.
Yes.
Clara. Thank you so much, ma'am. Sorry to bother you.
No, that is why I'm teaching now.
Yes.
That is why I'm teaching. That is why I'm teaching. And I said that research variables can be manipulated. They can be observed.
Change.
Yes, they can be manipulated, they can be observed. Like now, if you go to a community now and you want to study their behavior, their social behavior, what will you do? You will carry out qualitative ethnographic study where you will go and observe their attributes. You go and observe. That's why I say a variable is any characteristics, is any attribute, is any element, is any condition, it is any factor that can be measured and that can also vary. They can vary across individuals, vary across groups, vary, across situations in a research study. So variables are not static. They can be manipulated, you can observe them. And I said that some variables are controlled. You can control some variables. Some variables are, confounding. That is, they affect both the dependent and independent variables. That is when we talk about the types of variables. If I'm carrying out a study that maybe let's say experimental study on let's say maybe these are Greek people drying of corn, and they've discovered that let's say I'm just using arbitrarily a number. Let's say 5 hours intensive sun can dry corn. We just say that, make that make Do you know sun is a variable, right?
Yes, ma'am.
The corn, drying of corn is a variable. But do you know that there could be an intervening variable? A variable can come now and make it not to dry, make that assumption not to work. What if weather suddenly change? Rain come. Has it not affected it?
Yes.
That rain is a variable. That rain is a variable that has affected. That has affected both the independent and dependent variable. So in that case now, we will call it condition. Weather condition. Weather condition disrupted this research work.
Intensive, yes.
Wow.
That is the thing. Like now, you're counseling a child. You are counseling a child, and you have mapped out, let me say, you have mapped out 7 days, that within 7 days of counseling of this client, the client will be better. And then within that 7 days, maybe the child fell ill, or you fell ill. You fell ill, sick, that you could not go to counsel. Counsel the child. Can you see?
Yes.
So it's that illness, that sickness, that's a factor. Sickness factor has affected. It's a variable.
Transportation factor.
It's a variable. So don't look at the variable as something that I don't know. How will I put it? Variable is not an object.
Ambiguous.
It's not that easy.
It's not ambiguous.
Yes. Any word that you've gotten it right now, Abi?
Yes, ma. Yes, ma.
Thank you.
Okay, beautiful.
Because I can come up with so many variables now.
So when you come up with your research topic, when you come up with your research topic or your study topic or study title, you look at which one is independent variable, which one is dependent variable. Would there be a confounding variable? Would there be a variable that has to be controlled and all that? Age is a variable. Gender is a variable. Depends on what you are studying. All right. So thank you very much. We'll meet.
Thank you, ma'am, for your time, ma'am.
Saturday. All right.
Really
Thank you.
Enjoy your class.
Enjoy your
Time for the motherly.
Okay. Thank you for understanding. The only way you will show that you have understood it is when you are going to write the exam now and you pass. Then my heart will be glad.
It will make you proud.
Don't bring Jesus into it.
We'll walk, definitely walk. See,
That
like
is
you
the only
said,
way we know
in
that you
my own case
understood.
now, Jesus is a variable. It's a factor.
You say what is a variable?
Jesus is a variable. So let's come.
Jesus is a no, don't break. I don't agree with you.
No, it's a variable.
Okay.
On my own, it's a variable.
Okay, but
you might not.
Jesus will not disappoint you. It's you that will disappoint yourself when you fail to read, when you fail to come to the class.
I will definitely work. So if I'm adding one as a variable,
hard working is a variable now.
Sure.
Hard working is a variable.
Sure.
Student hard work and the student performance. You see, performance is a variable. Hard work is a variable.
Variable, yeah. Just on a
hard work is a variable. Better performance is a variable. So better performance is depending on what? Student hard work. And student coming to class.
Attendance.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. God bless you.
Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you.
Yes,